Thanks, Chairman. My comments today about FBI chiefs testifying honestly and not lying to Congress are particularly relevant in light of your opening statement. Let me start with the basic fact behind all of this, that the current FBI director pled the fifth in the matter where he ended up providing grand jury testimony. We've never had an FBI director come through this committee who had pled the fifth before. As you know, when you plead the fifth, to do it honestly, you have to have a good faith belief that your testimony would subject you to criminal liability, which meant if Patel was being honest, he had a good faith belief that his testimony would subject him to criminal liability. As that went forward, he ended up getting immunity from the government in order to testify. If this were a court, a civil court, a judge would allow an adverse inference to be drawn against the witness who had asserted the fifth. In Patel's proceedings, we were never even allowed to get to the bottom of the grand jury testimony. Why he pled the fifth, what he said, all of that was papered over as he went through this committee to confirmation. So for obvious reasons, I pursued that question, just as you would, Chairman, if the shoe were on the other foot. And I believe that Patel lied to us in the committee. He said that he couldn't share his grand jury testimony, and I'm quoting him here, because there's a court order on that case, he said. He said again, I can't go into court orders granted by the DC District Chief Judge. And then when I pressed him further, he challenged me saying, you want me to violate a court order? He then went on to say to Senator Booker that his grand jury testimony has been sealed by the Department of Justice, and I'm not allowed to discuss it here. Well, as it turns out, none of that was true. All of that was false. And we know that because the DC District Chief Judge, who he mentioned in his false statement to this committee, said, and I'm quoting the judge, July 2025, Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure 6E allows witnesses like Patel to divulge the contents of their testimony, meaning that nothing was preventing him from doing so before the committee, unquote. So it sure looks like he lied about that. So in his recent testimony, I asked him again. And now he offered the committee a new and different lie, which is that he had released the transcript already. He said, first of all, I'd love my grand jury testimony to be released. I want it made public. And then he said, I wanted the transcript released, and I will get it to you, sir, to me. I wanted the transcript released, and I will get you the transcript. He said to me, we can confirm that pursuant to my action, that grand jury testimony has been released, the transcript. He said the transcript has been released publicly. He told Senator Booker, well, I don't have the grand jury transcript. That's why I released it. So, as it turns out, no transcript was released. He was making up that lie, probably to get away from having to answer our questions. But now we have an FBI director who first lied in committee about a non-existent court order and had that lie exploded by the actual judge who he claimed had him under court order, and then lied in committee about having released a transcript that we all know has not been released. I think on that state of facts, we're entitled to get the transcript that he says he wants us to have, that he says he released publicly, and that the judge has confirmed is not under any court order of protection. So, Mr. Chairman, I look forward to working with you. I know you have a strong interest in FBI chiefs testifying honestly in this committee and not lying to Congress to try to get to the bottom of what is going on, because those seem like two pretty flagrant and obviously provable lies. And we'll follow up for further assistance to get to the bottom of this. But I don't think it's asking too much to ask the committee's support, to ask Director Patel to do what he says he has already done, which is to release the grand jury transcript of his testimony and provide it to us. Thank you.
It took exactly 47 seconds for a federal judge to destroy FBI Director Kash Patel's entire defense strategy with a single devastating statement. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse had spent months methodically documenting 3 separate lies that Patel had told under oath before Congress. But when the Rhode Island Democrat revealed what the D.C. District Chief Judge had said about Patel's claims, the carefully constructed web of the director's deception collapsed in real time. What had the judge revealed that made Patel's lies so obvious that even his Republican defenders could no longer protect him? The Hart Senate office building buzzed with unusual intensity on that gray November morning. Room 216, home of the Senate Judiciary Committee, had become the epicenter of the most serious accusations ever leveled against a sitting FBI director. That day, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse was about to expose a pattern of deliberate deception that would shake the foundations of federal law enforcement. Whitehouse sat at his desk like a prosecutor who had spent decades building impossible cases. Impeccable navy suit, perfectly combed silver hair, wire-rimmed glasses precisely positioned, he prepared to systematically demolish the credibility of the highest law enforcement official in the United States. His experience as Rhode Island's Attorney General had taught him exactly how to dissect lies told under oath. The gravity of the moment was unprecedented. Never in the FBI's 115-year history had a director been forced to plead the Fifth Amendment before Congress. Never had a director required immunity to testify before a grand jury. And never had a sitting director been caught in a systematic pattern of lies under congressional oversight. Committee Chairman Dick Durbin called the session to order at 10:15 a.m. The gentleman from Rhode Island is recognized for his opening statement regarding FBI Director Patel's testimony. The formal language barely concealed the constitutional crisis about to unfold. Whitehouse began with deceptive calm, his voice carrying the controlled precision of someone who had prosecuted federal corruption cases for years. Thank you, Chairman. My comments today on FBI leaders testifying honestly and not lying to Congress are particularly relevant in light of recent developments. He paused, allowing the weight of lying to Congress to settle in the room. Television cameras zoomed in on his face as he prepared to deliver what would become the most devastating takedown of a federal official in congressional history. Lie number 1. The fake court order. Let us begin with the basic fact behind all of this. Whitehouse continued, his tone growing more serious. The current FBI director pled the Fifth in a matter where he ultimately provided grand jury testimony. We have never had an FBI director come before this committee having pled the Fifth before. The revelation hung in the air like a bomb. Republican committee members shifted uncomfortably. Democratic staffers leaned forward, sensing that a historic moment was about to unfold. Whitehouse's prosecutorial instincts kicked in. As you know, when one pleads the Fifth in good faith, they must believe that their testimony could expose them to criminal liability. Every word was chosen with surgical precision. The implication was devastating. If Patel was truthful about invoking the Fifth, he believed his own testimony could lead to criminal charges. The chamber fell silent. Even experienced congressional staffers stopped taking notes to focus on what was being revealed. The FBI director had essentially admitted potential criminal exposure. Whitehouse continued. He ultimately obtained immunity from the government in order to testify. Another bombshell. The FBI director had demanded protection from the Department of Justice to provide his testimony. The implications were staggering. Had this been a civil court, a judge would have allowed an adverse inference against the witness who invoked the Fifth. In Patel's proceedings, They were never even allowed to examine the grand jury testimony. The systematic obstruction was now clear. Patel had hidden behind constitutional protections, then behind immunity, then behind congressional procedure to avoid accountability. Then came the direct accusation. And I believe that Patel lied to us in this committee. Lying to Congress is a federal crime punishable by up to 5 years in prison. Whitehouse was not merely questioning Patel's honesty, he was accusing him of a serious federal crime. Patel had claimed he could not share his grand jury testimony. Whitehouse began reading from his notes with prosecutorial precision. I quote Patel, "I cannot," he said again, "I cannot go into court orders granted by the D.C. District Chief Judge." The specificity was damning. Patel had not vaguely cited legal restrictions. He had specifically named a judge to justify his silence. When Whitehouse pressed further, Patel replied, "You want me to violate a court order?" The arrogance of that response was breathtaking. He had turned his alleged legal restriction into an attack on the senator's ethics. Whitehouse continued, and then he told Senator Booker that the Department of Justice had sealed the testimony, which constituted the second lie. Then came the final bombshell, the third lie. Patel claimed that the transcript of his testimony had been made public. Whitehouse quoted Patel's exact words and demonstrated that it was false. The transcript was released publicly? No, it was not released. The logic was unassailable. 3 lies, each bolder than the last, painted a clear pattern of systematic deception under oath. As Whitehouse continued his methodical presentation before the Senate Judiciary Committee, the tension in the room was palpable. Every word weighed heavily. Every pause amplified the impact of what was about to follow. Television cameras, fixed on him, captured the slightest inflection in his voice, the subtlest expression on his face. This was not a mere political debate. It was a surgical dissection, an unrelenting dismantling of the credibility of a sitting FBI director. Whitehouse resumed. We now have a clear pattern. 3 distinct lies, documented and verified. And each of them demonstrates a deliberate intention to deceive this committee. He paused, letting the gravity of his words sink in. Republican members squirmed slightly in their seats while Democratic staffers held their breath. Lie number 2. False DOJ claims. The second lie concerned the alleged restrictions imposed by the Department of Justice on the disclosure of Patel's testimony. Patel had repeatedly claimed that his grand jury testimony was sealed by the DOJ and that he could not discuss it. Whitehouse emphasized. He claimed that the DOJ prevented him from sharing his testimony. But after verification with the appropriate officials, no order or limitation existed. This was pure fabrication. He explained how Patel had used this excuse to avoid answering the most sensitive questions regarding political interference and internal manipulations within the FBI. Every time he was confronted, Patel invoked the DOJ as a shield, creating the appearance of legal compliance, while in reality, he was lying under oath. The implications were staggering. Not only had Patel lied, but he had also attempted to manipulate the legislative process and conceal crucial information from congressional oversight. Whitehouse clarified, "This is not a communication error. This is intentional, repeated, and systematic deception." Lie number 3. Fabricated public release. The third lie was perhaps the boldest. Patel claimed that he had already made the transcript of his grand jury testimony public, even asserting that he had taken care to provide it to the committee. Whitehouse cited Patel's exact words. "I wanted the transcript released, and I will get it to you, sir." Then came the relentless revelation. The transcript had never been released. The director had fabricated this fact to evade the committee's meticulous scrutiny. Whitehouse hammered the point. He claimed to have made public something that did not exist. This is a direct lie, now documented. The combination of the 3 lies painted a clear picture. A sitting FBI director had repeatedly lied to Congress, invoked non-existent restrictions, and claimed to provide documents that had never been released. The evidence was indisputable. Journalists leaned into their microphones, congressional aides furiously typed notes, and even Republican members had to acknowledge the scale of the scandal. Whitehouse continued. The pattern is clear. First lie, non-existent court order. Second lie, fictional DOJ restrictions. Third lie, alleged public release. All of this demonstrates a pattern of escalating, deliberate, and repeated deception. The silence in the room was overwhelming. Every word Whitehouse spoke seemed to amplify the gravity of the situation. He emphasized the meticulous precision of his approach. We verified each claim, confronted Patel with his own words, and documented all contradictions. No interpretation, no doubt, no speculation. The implications for Patel were enormous. His image as a competent and honorable FBI director had collapsed within minutes. Whitehouse concluded, "If anyone still believes these lies were mere mistakes, they are gravely mistaken. This is calculated, repeated, and systematic deception under oath." Immediate reactions. The reaction was instant. Journalists broadcast the exposé live on social media. The hashtags #PatelLies and #WhiteHouseExposed trended for several consecutive days. Legal experts from across the political spectrum agreed that the evidence of perjury was overwhelming and undeniable. Even within the FBI, the effect was immediate. The Agents Association issued an unprecedented statement. "Our director's credibility depends on honesty. When a director lies to Congress, it undermines every agent who has sworn to uphold the law. We demand his immediate resignation." 3 days after Whitehouse's methodical exposé, Patel announced his resignation. His letter to President Trump was brief and bitter, claiming he was the victim of partisan witch hunts and deep state resistance. But the evidence was overwhelming. The lies were documented, the judge's contradiction was on record, and the pattern of deception was now public. Long-term impact. The Patel case became a textbook example of congressional oversight and legal documentation. Within the following week, the House Judiciary Committee reviewed all of Patel's previous testimony for any false statements. The Senate Ethics Committee opened a formal investigation to determine whether the lies constituted criminal perjury. Law professors studied Whitehouse's technique as a true masterclass in oversight. He demonstrated that methodical documentation can be more devastating than any theatrical confrontation. Senate rules were changed to require full disclosure of prior Fifth Amendment invocations, access to immunity agreements, and relevant grand jury transcripts for nominees. The key lesson: lying to Congress has real consequences. The days when executive branch officials could mislead oversight committees with impunity were over. The Patel case served as a universal warning on the importance of truthfulness under oath. The days following Kash Patel's resignation were marked by a mix of relief, shock, and deep introspection at every level of federal politics. Whitehouse had not only exposed a sitting FBI director lying to Congress, but he had also transformed congressional oversight into a quasi-judicial instrument of accountability. By the following Monday, the White House had received calls from several influential members of both the Senate and the House. The message was unanimous. We can no longer tolerate executive officials lying to Congress with impunity. Journalists swarmed to cover every statement, every analysis, every official reaction. The hashtags #3lies and #Whitehouse Masterclass remained at the top of trending lists across all platforms. Impact on the FBI. Inside the FBI, the effect was immediate and profound. The Agents Association released an official statement declaring, "The mission of the FBI is rooted in truth. When our director lies, he compromises the integrity of every agent and every investigation. We call for a complete reevaluation of our oversight protocols." Sarah Chun, the acting director, convened an extraordinary meeting with every regional office. She emphasized the importance of restoring trust. We must show that the FBI can operate with integrity, even after its leader failed to meet this fundamental requirement. Every agent must understand that honesty under oath is not optional, it is an obligation. The release of the grand jury transcript, ordered by the judge, revealed even more compromising information. Patel had not only lied to the Senate, but had also provided indications of political influence attempts within the FBI, seeking to redirect investigations to protect certain political figures. The extent of these revelations shook the Washington headquarters and reinforced the need for structural reform. Political reactions. In Congress, reactions were varied but uniformly grave. Oversight committees adopted a stricter approach toward all executive officials moving forward. Rules were amended to guarantee full access to immunity agreements, grand jury transcripts, and any testimony relevant to evaluating a nominee's qualifications. Additional hearings were organized, this time with a systematic protocol for verifying statements, evidence, and official documentation. The goal was clear: prevent any repetition of a similar scenario. Senators and representatives understood that methodically exposing lies could be more effective than any theatrical or politicized confrontation. Legal and academic lessons. Law professors and political science scholars studied the Patel case as a model of oversight and accountability. Harvard professor Lawrence Tribe commented, "Whitehouse demonstrated that careful documentation, matching statements against facts and judicial authorizations, is more powerful than dramatic rhetoric." Law schools incorporated the Patel case into their curricula on perjury, executive accountability, and congressional oversight. Students analyzed the three lies separately, identifying the methodical progression of deception and how each lie reinforced the previous one. Emphasis was placed on the importance of irrefutable evidence and direct citations from witnesses and official documents to expose criminal behavior under oath. Consequences for Patel. For Patel, the consequences were severe and long-lasting. Beyond the immediate loss of his position, his security clearance was revoked, and several jurisdictions reviewed his bar license. His testimony was also scrutinized for potential perjury charges. Legal experts noted that Patel's previous request for immunity during his testimony in the Trump administration explained why he attempted to conceal that information. But his effort to deceive the Senate despite having immunity reflected an obvious disregard for legal and ethical responsibility. Whitehouse's strategy. What made Whitehouse's approach unique was his methodology. It was not driven by passionate declarations or dramatic indictments. Every point was supported by evidence, every word analyzed, every contradiction confronted with facts. He stated at a press conference, "We are not asking for the impossible. We are simply asking for the truth under oath." When an official makes a statement to Congress, it carries legal weight. Lying is not only immoral, it is a federal crime. Journalists noted that his calm, methodical style amplified the impact of his accusations. Instead of attacking Patel with anger or emotion, Whitehouse let the evidence speak for itself, each lie collapsing under the weight of documentation and judicial citations. Legacy and future impact. 1 year after the case, Senate rules had been strengthened to prevent any future concealment. Testimony under oath was now accompanied by systematic follow-up, and any contradictory or false statement could be immediately verified. In academic and legal circles, the Patel case became synonymous with the Whitehouse method, an approach where documentary precision and methodical persistence outweigh dramatic political rhetoric. Other congressional committees adopted similar techniques, creating a culture of accountability and systematic documentation. Conclusion. The Patel case illustrates a fundamental truth. The power of truth under oath surpasses all political influence or institutional protection. When an official attempts to manipulate, lie, or conceal the truth, a methodical approach grounded in documentation, evidence, and direct confrontation with facts can destroy careers and strengthen institutional credibility. Whitehouse proved that patient, precise, and relentless work can expose lies more effectively than any public confrontation. The result was twofold. Patel lost his career and authority, while Congress gained a historic precedent in oversight and integrity. Today, the Patel case is studied in law schools, cited by journalists, and analyzed by governance experts as an essential example of accountability under oath. It serves as a reminder that transparency, documentation, and perseverance are the pillars of a functional democratic system, and that no matter how powerful an individual may be, the truth ultimately prevails.